Like, people would walk who knows how many kilometers, 40 kilometers, 50 kilometers maybe in a day. And the whole distance of this is roughly around 500 kilometers. There's different
Wow.
measurements, but generally
Yeah.
people say 500 kilometers, roughly around 300 miles. There's these 53 woodblock prints. And if you look it up, it'll pop up right away on Wikipedia. But the beginning is considered Tokyo, Edo at the time, Nippon Bashi. It's this bridge in Tokyo, right by Tokyo Station.
Hmm.
And then you have the 53 stations, the post towns, and then the last, the end point is this bridge in Kyoto called Sanjo Ohashi, the bridge on Third Avenue, I guess you could translate it as.
Okay.
And so I did it backwards in that sense, in that I
Hmm.
started at the bridge in Kyoto and walked all the way to the bridge in Tokyo.
On today's episode, we have Tony R. Vega for episode 154. And he talked to us about life in Hawaii, walking the Tokaido Road between Kyoto and Tokyo. And also, he is visually impaired and legally blind. So we talk through those challenges about traveling with those conditions and also what it's like between Hawaii, but also Japan. He has some very interesting notes about that in terms of how different they can be. But super interesting conversation. Don't forget to like and subscribe on my YouTube channel. And you can also leave a review on Apple or Spotify. And I'll see you next time.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode. I'm joined by Tony Vega, a legally blind content creator who focuses on Japanese content. And Tony has a website called japankyo.com. That's KYO. Today we're going to talk about Tony walking across Japan from Kyoto to Tokyo along the historic Tokaido Road, which took about 29 days and covered around 500 kilometers. Tony also has a YouTube documentary covering this journey, and he's now planning to walk the Kyoto to Hiroshima Trail, which is going to be super exciting. Tony, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Great, great to be here, and thank you for having me on the show, James.
No worries. Really looking forward to it. Can you tell the listeners where you're based right now?
Yeah, sure. So I live in Hawaii. I've been here for 10 years. Aside from that, I've been like on the East Coast of the US, several years in Japan, but yeah, based in Hawaii at the moment, in Honolulu specifically.
Oh, wow. And what's the reason for Hawaii?
Well, I came here after living in Japan for a while. I came here to attend the University of Hawaii's master's degree in Japanese language and linguistics. So a super nerdy and rare master's degree program. There are not a lot of those in the world. So Hawaii seemed like a wonderful place with a lot of connections to Japan. And I got accepted. So I came here and I stayed ever since.
Okay, I've got some questions about Hawaii life or Hawaiian life, should I say? Because I went there a long time ago now,
Mhm.
2014. So I had to
Oh,
leave Australia after my visa, and I thought, oh, well, where's good to go? Let's go Hawaii. It's in the middle of nowhere,
mhm.
and I loved my time there. Very expensive. Wasn't
Yeah,
the
it is.
backpacker prices that I was expecting. But yeah, tell me about Hawaii. What's great there? Why are you living there? And also, what are the best islands in your view to go and see?
Sure. So, Hawaii, I mean, it goes without saying. I mean, it's a beautiful place, very unique. I mean, I think it is technically the most remote, like, place on Earth in terms of like, distance from the continental, like,
Yeah.
US and all that and everything around it. But great place, but crazy expensive. The rent is expensive, food is expensive. So that is the unfortunate part of living here. It's the price of living in paradise, right? But
Mm.
like for me personally, like I said, I came because of that connection with Japan. And there is a lot of people of Japanese ancestry here. There's also a lot of recent Japanese immigrants from Japan. There's great Japanese food as well, because there's a lot of people from Japan that come here. They open up shop, and so there's no problem with finding good Japanese food here. And I go back to Japan at least once or twice a year. So it's a great place because it's like the closest I can be there pretty much while still being in like the 50, states
Yeah.
of the US, right? So for me, that's worked out great. And I'm glad I'm here. But yeah, it is an expensive place. So, but if you're coming to visit, of course, Oahu is wonderful, and that's kind of the city, the population center. But like Maui, there's some beautiful places in
Mhm.
Maui. I've been able to go there. There's just wonderful hiking trails. And then of course there's the Big Island, which is, obviously it's the Big Island. It's the biggest one. There's the active volcano over there. But there's just a variety of ecosystems. There's the more desert-like areas. There's the rainforest forest type areas. There's the coast. And if you're into water sports, all that surfing, just of course, beautiful, beautiful place.
Okay, and for me, I thought all three of those islands, I think you mentioned Maui, the Big
Hmm.
Island, and Oahu, very, very different.
Hmm.
And my take on them is they all have their good parts, right? In unique
Yep.
parts,
Yep.
which I did love. But I would say I'm not sure what you think now, but the locals, what are they thinking about tourism right now? Because you do read some stuff that they're not too, what's the word? Well, is happy. We're not too happy that there's too many tourists coming over.
I agree. I mean, that is always a concern, and of course there is the history here, which is problematic with the U.S. coming in and taking over and all that, and the local, Hawaiian population
Mm,
suffering because of that. There is a history here that you have to be aware of and respectful about. But the problem as well is that Hawaii is so tourist dependent.
yeah.
Like during the pandemic, it was a huge, huge blow to the economy, and it still I don't think it's recovered. There's a lot more population like coming back in terms of tourists. Like when I go to Waikiki, every once in a while, or to the more touristy areas, like I've noticed a significant increase in people from obviously when things were starting to open back up just a couple of years ago. But for example, Japan was like the one of the biggest demographics of people that would come to
Mm,
Hawaii, and that population has not increased at the same numbers that it was
mm,
before the pandemic. Part of that, of course, the yen is quite cheap right now, and so it makes it even more expensive for people to come here. But I think, yeah, tourism has probably not bounced back to where it was pre-pandemic, and that is a problem because a lot of people here they make their living from that, right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
it's this tricky situation where like too much can be concerning for like the nature and erosion and pollution and things like that, but at the same time the economy is so dependent on tourism that when something like that, when tourism goes down, like a lot of people may lose their jobs and things like that happened in the past few years. So it's this push and pull. It's a really tricky thing.
Yeah, it's a tough one, that, isn't it?
Hmm.
I don't know how you resolve it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of what if there's a plan B, if there's another industry that can maybe take it over, then it's fine, isn't it? But if that's the main industry that most of the locals get their money and income from, then I don't know what you can do but welcome tourists back.
It really is. For example, like West Oahu, which is a different campus of the University of Hawaii, I think they're going to be opening up like a film and like production school. They've invested a lot in that, so
Mm,
it seems there's awareness of investing into technology and bringing up new industries, but those are very like long-term kind of things, right? Like
mm,
Hawaii is a very popular place for people to come and shoot, films and all that. But yeah, like it's still tourism is just overwhelmingly like the main industry. So unless there's like other income sources coming in, like people
yeah.
are just really dependent on that.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Okay. And
Hmm.
one final thing for the main island where you are right now. I went to
Hmm.
Lanikai Beach, right?
Yeah.
Is that a touristy place or is that more of a local beach? Because I think I can remember, got told to go there because of Waikiki is obviously very touristy, right? But
Yeah.
someone
So
said, get a bus to the other side of the island, go and see that. You won't regret it. So I went over there and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It's amazing.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, Lanikai, it's definitely. I think many people say you got to go there. And I agree. Look, Waikiki is usually most people will stay in that area. The
Yeah.
closest, most convenient, and famous beach is Waikiki. It's nothing wrong with it, but it can be quite crowded. Um, Lanikai is a bit more out of the way. It's
Hmm.
in Kailua, and you do have to, whether it's you hop on a bus or you take an Uber, whatever it is, however you get there, you do have to go a little bit out of the way of like the main place where most people are. So there's going to be less people over there, and there's less hotels and all that in that area. So it's a little bit more how can I put it, off, I wouldn't say off the beaten path because it is quite well known,
Yeah.
but it's definitely not like most people, if they're only going to go to one place, it's probably going to be Waikiki.
Yeah,
But
yeah, of
I
course.
do
Yeah, yeah,
recommend checking out the
yeah.
other beaches because it's just a different side of the island, maybe less people, and just a different vibe because like Kailua is just more of a small town kind of vibe
Hmm.
as opposed to Waikiki, which is like the tourist place.
Yeah, I had a nightmare there. I went to go and hike a viewpoint,
Hmm.
and I got up to the top. And as I got to the top, one of my flip-flops broke. I was like, oh crap! I got to walk back down on the snow on the stones and barefoot.
Yeah.
And I hobbled down the trail, and I found this shop, unbelievable shop, like just by Lanakai Beach that sold flip-flops. And
Uh-huh.
they sold this pair called San UK. It's not an endorsement, but they are because they're great. And I bought them, and I couldn't believe what I was buying. Right, they're like yoga mat material, and I've had them ever since. And it wasn't
Oh
because
wow.
my foot was hurting on it. I don't think. I think it's just because they felt so great. So my memory
Yeah.
is amazing beach. The water sort of goes into the backyards of like houses on the beach. It's incredible.
Hmm.
Less touristy, you're right. And my
Yeah.
flip flop broke, and I bought some brand new ones. That's all I remember really.
Yeah. I assume you might have gone on the pillbox hike. I think that's
Yes, yeah,
the
yeah.
most
Sort of.
popular one in that
Okay, yeah,
area. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, great views.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah.
Okay, I'd like to delve a little bit back into the travel
Mhm.
background of yourself and most of my
Mhm.
guests. Where did you initially grow up, and was there any memories of travel growing up as well?
Sure. So I was born in New York, and I was there till I was about 10, and then moved to Peru because my family's originally from Peru,
Oh wow.
and spent like about a year and a half, 2 years there, and then we moved to Florida, and that's where I spent like my kind of teen years into university, and then I started going to Japan. So, like for me, tra like moving around happened, but it wasn't so much like a travel thing in the early years. It was like we go to Peru like every summer. Um, so that was just like normal for me. And then, once I got to university, then I started going to Japan on my own, and that's like I kind of kept going back there. So in later years, I started going to other countries, but like growing up, it was mainly like, okay, our family's in Peru, so let's go to Peru. And then once I had the actual resources to go start going by myself, like, okay, I want to go to Japan. Like that's the thing, that's the place I've always wanted to go to. And so I started going there on my own.
And was there like an interest in travel, or just it's just something that you like doing, or was there like a burning desire to go and see different cultures or different countries?
So I think like the interest in travel started developing through my interest in Japan. So I started to go to Japan, and then from there, like, oh, I was like, you know what, there's actually cheap flights to Taiwan. And I went to
Hmm.
Taiwan. And then eventually started going, I went to Korea as well. And unfortunately, I haven't had the chance to go to that many countries yet, but like I really want to. It's just like now with the content creation kind of aspect of like that's what I've made
Hmm.
my career into. Like I'm kind of focusing on Japan and a little bit on Hawaii as well at the moment. But
Yeah,
as hopefully as I continue to grow, I can kind of expand and
yeah, yeah.
check out more areas because I really really want to do that. I have friends in like Australia, and a few other places as well, Singapore, and I'm like they keep telling me come. I'm like yes, I need to do that.
I tell you what, we need to come to Hawaii, so we can
Yeah,
do
yeah,
we,
yeah.
we can do an episode there. That'd be great. But you're
Oh
right.
yeah.
We'll come to that in a bit about YouTube, about
Uh,
content creation, because I've got some questions, and I think
yeah.
I'm trying to, yeah, deep down, trying to go to that area as well, right? So I'm trying to build my
Mhm,
YouTube up and stuff like that. But we'll come to that in a second.
mhm.
I want to touch on that I mentioned in the intro that you're legally blind, which
Yeah.
was, I guess, confirmed in 2003 at the age of 18.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What does that actually mean? And
So,
maybe tell him maybe a little bit about your eyesight, about what you can and can't see, or what the
sh-
like for a
sure,
layman's
sure.
person like me who probably has decent, all right website eyesight. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. So, legally blind, it's like it's actually a legal term, like according to the law, there's a certain,
Yeah.
level that then you're considered blind. But basically there's a lot of terms, either partially blind or low
Mm,
vision. And there's a spectrum, right? Like every person sees a little bit different, completely sighted
mm,
to, like people with glasses to completely blind and everything in between. In my case, I have essentially basically no central vision. So
okay.
I can see the sides and the bottom. And what that means in practical terms is like I can't see regular size text. I have to use magnification on the computer, for example, to
Hmm.
like read emails and stuff like that. But because magnification takes so long to read something, if it's anything of any decent length, I use text to speech.
Okay. Mm.
And like for example, on the street, if somebody's just walking by me, I can't see their face, right? Like unless they're
Got it.
like right up on me, I can't recognize people visually.
Mm.
Um, street signs, I can't see that. Um, like if stairs, a lot of times, stairs do have a bit of contrast on them. I think there's
Yeah.
an awareness that people, that is helpful to people, but some stairs don't, and sometimes those catch me by surprise. But like I have a white cane that I use when I'm walking around outside.
Hmm.
I can see well enough to walk without one, especially like in places that I'm familiar with. But if I'm walking around outside, it's just safer because I may not see people coming at me on a bicycle and things like that. I got to
Mm.
let people around me know that I can't see that well. So I do use a white cane to navigate a little bit, but also just to let people know outside that hey, I can't see you walking at me. So yeah, I'm very blind, but not completely blind. I still have usable vision in some regard. It's tricky, but like that's why I kind of have to explain like what I
Yeah,
can't
of
and
course.
can't see. Yeah.
It's really hard to imagine, isn't it?
hmm
For
It,
someone
it is. It is. Like,
who
I mean,
has
I was
normal eyesight.
completely sighted. I didn't use glasses or anything. I was driving. I was, watching Chinese and Japanese movies with subtitles and all that. And then, within the matter of like maybe a month, like I went from totally normal sighted to basically I
Wow.
couldn't drive anymore. And it was very sudden and a complete like at the beginning, doctors didn't know exactly what it was. It took a while for one specific like neuro ophthalmologist to like say, oh, I know what you have. And apparently it's quite rare. So yeah, there was quite a transition period. It was not easy, but
Mm.
it eventually, little by little, I started to realize like, hey, there's still stuff that I can do, and those things that I wanted to do, like they're still possible. If I may have to do it a little bit of a different way, but
Yeah.
there's things that I still can do.
That was actually my next question. Was it
Mhm.
gradual or instant? But it sounds like it's pretty instant.
It was, and it started in one eye and expanding, started in the other eye. Then, and yeah, like the first doctor said, like, oh, it's probably just stress because it's like,
Mm.
like a graduation and all that. And it's like, oh, okay. So I got glasses. They didn't really help. And then, like I said, after like maybe two more doctors, it was the last one that figured it out. And yeah, there's no treatment at the moment. It's the optic nerve. Part of the optic nerve died. So it's been I guess more than 20 years now, and it's been pretty stable. So thankfully,
Right.
it has been, and I'm still able to do things the way that I've been doing them for the past 20 years. And I've dealt with it, and I've been able to accomplish a lot despite that. But yeah, like the at the beginning, it was a sharp thing, that sharp transition, so to speak, right? And there was a long period where I was thinking like I'm never going to be able to go to Japan. I'm
Mm.
like, I can't do this, I can't do that. And I was it was kind of like a dark period, but um yeah, eventually like the kind of like desire to go to Japan kind of started to make like, well, maybe I'll give it a shot. Maybe I'll give it a shot. And little by little I started realizing like, hey, I think I can do this. And yeah, I've done quite a few things since then.
Oh, that brings us nicely into Japan. But amazing, by the way, that
Mhm.
you've adapted. I mean, that's incredible in terms of. I think we talk a lot about situations and they're not as bad as you think, but like that
Mhm.
is quite a big life-changing thing, isn't it? Where you just go from seeing normally to that uh, vision just kind of deteriorating a little bit. It's like, oh wow, you do normally probably think in your own mind, oh, it's temporary, right? It'll pass by, but
Yeah.
I guess you have that period of it'll pass by, wouldn't it? And then
Yeah.
you start to realize, oh, maybe it's actually staying. And I guess that's
Yeah.
when your third doctor came in and confirmed it and stuff. And I guess that's a bit of clarity then you can start to formulate plans about how to deal with it and how to move on, right? Um,
Yeah, it's acceptance is the
yeah.
trickiest thing, right? Like, because
Mm,
for a long time I go like, well, maybe there'll be some treatment that will
mm,
fix this and this and that, and it's like, and maybe there will be, like, I don't know, 10 years from now, I don't know,
yeah.
but I can't focus on that, right? It's like, what do I want to do now, and what do I need to do to accomplish that? That's eventually like the kind of thinking that I started doing, right? Because like for a long time it's like I loved cars. I wasn't able
Yeah.
to drive anymore. I loved
Yeah.
anime and foreign movies. My Japanese was not anywhere near good enough to enjoy it without subtitles.
Mm,
And then all of a sudden, like I couldn't see the subtitles. So like a lot of the things that I enjoyed, I loved video games. Couldn't really
yeah.
play video games anymore.
Mm,
Like so many things that I enjoyed, I just couldn't enjoy them in that same way anymore. But at the same time, that ended up being a little bit of that push that made me like learn the language Japanese and made me like kind of challenge myself, where maybe I would have been too lazy to do that otherwise.
Well, yeah, it's all about that's hindsight, isn't it? About what
Hmm.
you would have been like without it. Yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah.
interesting thought that the only thing I can relate to is I had an aggressive infection in my groin, right?
Hmm.
So I it happened over 2 days instantly, and I was like, oh, what is this? And like the pain was unbelievable, like beyond anything
Right.
I've experienced. And it took 10 doctors to figure it out, and eventually
Wow.
there was a cure for that. But at the time, you're thinking, oh, I have to sign these forms to like hip operation, hip replacement. I'm like, bloody hell, I'm only 24, 25, 26. Okay, yeah,
Hmm.
better sign that form. You're out of it. You've got morphine on tap. And if you know you're in trouble a little bit when you've got like doctors and nurses around your bed and they're all discussing and like, oh, why is there like five, six, seven, eight people just like talking and asking me
Yep.
questions all the time? You know, you're a little bit of a mystery there, but thankfully I got through it. But yeah, there were like 4 or 5 weeks of, oh, crikey, is travel gonna be possible again? Can I walk? Like they do run through your mind.
Yeah. 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 It's, those uncertain times, right? That's
Yeah, yeah,
really scary, and your mind starts to go everywhere, and like all those plans you had, like it's like, well, am I going to be able to do that still, right? But
yeah.
sometimes it gets really bad, but I think a lot of times, like you mentioned, there are still ways. Like it's not, it may not be as bad as, you start to go down those like spirals, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
a lot of times there are things that you can do to deal with that, and thankfully, like for you it worked out, and for me, I've found ways to deal with like the limitations that have come with this, and
Mm.
I'm doing okay.
Yeah, you're doing great. We should now
Hmm.
going to lead on to Japan,
Yep.
and the amount of stuff you've achieved there is incredible. But first of all, I
Hmm.
want to kick off with where was your interest in Japan? Do you know why? Was it just their culture? Was it the gaming aspect? Like, what was your thinking there?
So I think, so I grew up in a time where I think, a lot of people, like, let's just say even today, like anime has become so like prevalent, but like even like in the 90s, like it was like Nintendo,
Mm,
right? And then anime was starting to like get that traction, Dragon Ball Z and all that stuff. But
yeah.
also in Peru, like anime was being broadcast on TV dubbed in Spanish, and like I wasn't even really fully aware like some of that stuff was from Japan at the time. I kind of started figuring out little by little. So I think like I grew up kind of absorbing this stuff. And then the more that I realized, like, oh wait, this is from Japan, this is from Japan. I actually have like cousins that are half Japanese that are in Peru and Japan. I realized that too. So a lot of these things just started coming together. And then in high school, in junior high, I decided I'm going to buy a book, and like I started kind of studying the language a little bit.
Mm,
Didn't really learn much because I was like, I don't know, like 13 years old, and it's like
yeah.
you're not going to learn much. But then in high school, like there was a Japanese class, and I said, like, you know what? I already know Spanish because I grew up speaking Spanish,
Hmm.
and I have to take 2 years of a language. And Japanese just happened to be there in Miami, Florida. There's not a lot of schools that offer Japanese. This was very rare.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but it just happened to be that one had this like, he was an older Taiwanese gentleman,
Ah,
that
okay.
he had some crazy stories about growing up. He was such a character, but he was teaching Japanese, and it just my luck, right? Like I was
Yeah,
into
yeah,
that kind of
yeah.
thing, and I didn't want to take Spanish or some romance language that was kind of like Spanish. So
Mm.
it's like, okay, I'll shoot Japanese. I didn't learn that much 'cause it was kind of like a disorderly class. Like there's a lot of slackers in that class, but I enjoyed it. And then finally, when I got into university, I started taking it more seriously. And then the eyesight thing happened, and I was still taking Japanese. Like when I entered university, I wasn't sure what I wanted to study, but the one thing that I knew that I wanted to do was to continue studying Japanese.
Hmm.
And I got into that. I really liked learning the language, and I got to this kind of crossroads where I decided, like, well, I've put so much time into learning Japanese. Either I should give up because it's going to be a waste of time if I just keep going with this and I'm not serious about it, or really get serious about it. And I decided to get serious about it. And that's when I really started to improve and became actually able to like speak the language.
And then you started to visit the country,
So
and
the kind of trigger was my first
yeah,
visit to Japan in
yeah.
2006. I went with a friend, and I spent like 4 weeks there. And I realized, like, I've been studying like 2.5 years, 3 years in university, and I can't have a conversation. Like I can understand some things here and there. And that's when I had that kind of moment where I was like, well, either I need to get serious about this, or like it was fun and I should move on. Right.
Right.
And then I decided, like, okay, I'm gonna get serious about this. And that's when I started putting more time like outside of class and just like studying on my own time.
But then you start to visit to go and study, but also work in Japan. So how did you do that in terms of the visa situation? And
Mhm.
then how did you keep going back to do that? Was it on the tourist visa, or was you getting like courses over there, like, or was it with in conjunction with your university? How did that work?
Sure. So the first time, like I said, was with the Fran just tourist visa.
Yeah.
Then the second time was when I decided to do a study abroad. And that was something that I had been wanting to do for years. And then, when the eyesight thing happened, I thought like, well, that's probably not going to happen. But then
Mm.
I wanted to do it. I came back from that trip and I said like, no, like I want to keep studying Japanese. I want to be able to speak it. I should go. And then I started speaking to my Japanese teacher and this and that. We figured it out. And I said, okay, I think I can do this. And then I started studying every single day. And thankfully I was going to school with scholarships. So that paid for basically all of my study in Japan. Spent a year there in Osaka.
Oh
Was
wow.
a wonderful experience.
Yeah.
Osaka is great because it's such a well place like city and it's right next to Kyoto. So I would go to Kyoto so many weekends.
Hmm.
Um, of course the cherry blossoms and the fall foliage and special events and then going to Osaka and just traveling around that whole area. It was a year of just almost every weekend going somewhere. Um, but then that made me realize like I lived in a dorm and I was mostly, living on my own, going to the supermarket on my own. And that really made me realize like, hey, like I can live an independent life. Like I know enough Japanese to live comfortably in Japan. I if I'm in trouble, I can explain my situation, my eyesight. I
Mm.
can understand what people tell me is like, hey, walk this way if I'm asking for directions. That gave me the confidence to try to go back again. And then from there, like I went back to Florida, taught some Japanese for a little, like a year, while I applied to the JET program, basically to become a teacher in Japan, an English
Okay.
teacher.
Yeah.
And I got accepted, and I was able to go to teach English for 3 years in Kobe, which is right next to Osaka, so same area. And Kobe is a beautiful city too. So very happy that I was placed there. And 3 years teaching English, elementary school, junior high, and the school for the blind. That was another wonderful experience.
Hmm.
And I was teaching Spanish kind of on the side secretly. I'm not supposed to, but I was doing that too. So making a little extra money there.
Why not?
Um, yeah. And so like just I loved learning the language and just Japan for me, like as a person with that can't drive, for example,
Hmm.
uh, like there's trains everywhere.
Dream
It's so
place.
easy to get
Yeah.
around.
Yeah.
It's so easy to just live independently there. And again, because I can speak the language, like I rarely have problems with that. Um, yeah, so it was just a wonderful experience. I love the history, the culture and all that. So, getting to be there, of course, and experience like school life from the perspective of a teacher, but nevertheless getting to see that side of Japanese society was also very interesting and I enjoyed that as well.
And can you speak the language, would you say, fluently now?
Yeah. I mean, I make mistakes here and there. Of course, I'm not a
Yeah, of course.
native speaker, but
Yeah.
I do translation. I've done interpretation as well. So yeah, I produce content in Japanese as well. So I'm
Oh, wow.
confident
Okay.
in my
Yeah, yeah.
Japanese. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. That's amazing.
Hmm.
And before we get stuck into the Kyoto to Tokyo walk,
Hmm.
I wanted to ask, so if you're listening right now, watching right now, and someone's not really lived there before, maybe visited, but lived, I
Hmm.
assume that these different cities like Osaka, Kyoto, Tokyo, Kobe, or Hiroshima or Nagasaki, they all have their own little quirky niche about what that city's about, right? So where
Hmm.
I'm going with this question is, where should someone put themselves first to maybe like settle into Japan life if they're staying a bit longer than a tourist visa, right? So for me,
Sure.
for example, if I was
Hmm.
to analyze my 4 weeks there, Tokyo would be an interesting place to start because it's crazy. It's so
Hmm.
big. Osaka we found all equally as quite intense. And when we walked there, like, oh, there's things above us, level underneath us, like it's all going on. Kyoto, a bit more traditional and chilled out. And down the south, Nagasaki was like way like people a bit more different there, like than traditional Japanese. I think a bit more quirky, a bit more of
Hmm.
a laugh, if you like, in terms of the Western culture. And Hiroshima was just quite an interesting place because of the history. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm going. in your view, where would you place someone first just to get used to the idea of the Japanese culture?
I mean, I think you highlighted the fact that yeah, each region can have its own kind of personality,
Mm,
quirks. There are certain stereotypes that some to some extent can be true and sometimes maybe not
mm,
always true, but yeah, like Tokyo, for example, just such a dense city.
yeah.
Like I like I said, I walked from Kyoto to Tokyo and I had to walk across Tokyo, and that walk made me realize like Tokyo is not that big, but it's so dense.
Yeah, yeah.
So many little side streets, so many, up and down in the buildings and the basements and just
Overwhelming.
yeah. So you can spend, a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks just exploring just little towns and little areas of Tokyo, just outside of like the most famous places. I think that's great, but Tokyo is Tokyo, right? Like once you get out of Tokyo, like you start to see like just a completely different areas. Like Kyoto, as you mentioned, like is great in terms of the history, the temples, the shrines, and all that. Very touristy. There's a lot of
Mm,
tourists over there. It can get
yeah.
quite crowded. So like it can get quite expensive, especially during like the cherry blossom season.
Mm,
So, I think Osaka is a great place to spend some time in because it's such a well located city. So like if you wanna there's some affordable places in Osaka as well. So you can spend time in Osaka. You can take the train over to Kyoto. You can take the train over to Kobe. You can go over to like Himeji Castle, which is like further away from Kobe, but that's one of the most famous castles in Japan. And of course the bullet train is there, so you can hop on over to
mm,
Nagoya. Like Osaka, I think is a great place if you want to just go around. After you're done with Tokyo, I don't know, maybe like Yokohama is a great place too, because then you can start to get into like the other areas of like, for example, the Hakone area, which is really well known for some hiking, but also like the what's it called? The hot springs.
oh, yeah.
And Yokohama itself also right on the ocean, just very historic as well with like international trade and all that,
Mm,
Chinatown. So like I like Yokohama quite a bit. I like kind of like the cities that are right next to like the famous ones because those tend to be like
yeah.
really good hubs to go around that area as well.
Because there's so many of them. Like you can literally look at a map and go, right, I'm not going to go to Tokyo, Kyoto, and Osaka. And then you look next door on the map, it's like, oh wow, yeah, there's all these other cities that are huge, and you don't really know much about them because they don't get the
Yeah.
limelight. So they'd be pretty cool to go and check out, I think.
Yeah. And Yokohama also like I think consistently gets voted like one of the most like easy places to live. I think there was just a list that came out this year, a Japanese list, and Yokohama was right at the top.
Oh wow.
So it's a very nice city. It's also like less, I don't know, maybe like 30-minute train ride to Tokyo.
Mm,
And of course there's the bullet train right there. So just really easy to get around. Like the airport, which one was it? It's actually quite close. Like the Haneda airport, was it? I think there's not even Haneda. I think it was Haneda, the one that was closer to Yokohama. It was a friend from Yokohama picked me up, drove me over there. It was very close. I didn't realize how close it was. So Yokohama is very nice. I do recommend it, especially if you're going to do a long stay. I think that's a good option.
oh, there you go. Don't know much about it. We
Mhm,
didn't go. Yeah,
mhm.
we're there for 4 weeks, but didn't make it to Yokohama. Okay.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about your walk, which sounds
Mhm.
incredible, the Kyoto to Tokyo walk. Can you tell the listeners and the watchers what is there a special name for that walk, and what does it encompass in terms of distance and time?
Sure. So, there's multiple ways to travel from Kyoto to Tokyo in terms of the roads, but
Mm,
the specific one that I tried to stick to was the Tokaido, which literally means like the East Sea Road or route.
hmm
Basically, it goes along the eastern coast, right? And this is a very historically important road. Like even to this day, for example, the bullet train that travels in that area is called the Tokaido Shinkansen, the Tokaido Bullet Road, the bullet
hmm
train. the Tokaido people, that is still like a common name. But it was specifically important in the Edo period. So we're talking from like 1600 to 1868. And the reason for that is that at the time, the shogun, right? Like there's a serious shogun. People have heard the word shogun, but the ruler said, okay, all the local lords have to travel back and forth from their local domain to Tokyo at the time called Edo, periodically throughout the year. And so that was to prevent rebellion. So it was a way to make the lords like spend money on these like caravans to go to the capital, and then they would sequester their families in the capital, and then the lord would have to go back to his domain. So if they tried to rebel, then they had like the wife or whatever in Edo. So it was this whole like way to keep the economy going, but also control the local lords and keep them, like, hey, don't act up because we got your family over here, right? The system worked for like over 250 years. But so because of that, there were these roads that became very developed, right? They were already like these roads that were there, but they became even more developed because there were need for these travelers, right? And there were these post towns along the way, 53 post towns on this Tokaido Road. This was the most famous of these roads between the West Japan and East Japan. And on Tokaido specifically, there were these 53 post towns. And basically what these were like kind of rest stops, almost like highway rest stops like nowadays, where there would be a place to sleep and food and entertainment and the geisha and the pleasure quarters and this and that, right? Like, people would walk who knows how many kilometers, 40 kilometers, 50 kilometers maybe in a day, and then, rest there and then walk. And the whole distance of this is roughly around 500 kilometers. There's different measurements, but generally people say 500 kilometers, roughly around 300 miles. So these 53 post towns are famous also because they got immortalized in these woodblock prints. There's these 53 woodblock prints. And if you look it up, it'll pop up right away on Wikipedia. But the beginning is considered Tokyo, Edo at the time, Nipponbashi. It's this bridge in Tokyo, right by Tokyo Station. And then you have the 53 stations, the post towns, and then the last, the end point is this bridge in Kyoto called Sanjo Ohashi, the bridge on Third Avenue, I guess you could translate it as.
Okay.
And that is the kind of the technical end of this Tokaido Road. And so I did it backwards in that sense, in that I started at the bridge in Kyoto and walked all the way to the bridge in Tokyo.
And is that a very popular route now for like hikers and walkers?
There are portions of that are. Most people don't walk the whole thing because a lot of it now is just, modern, concrete and asphalt and highways. So it's not, there are portions that are, I'll be blunt, like it's boring. It's like my phone tells me like walk 10 kilometers straight line along this highway. It's like, okay. And like, it's hot and I'm like almost like starting to like daydream here and like, just like walking like a zombie. But there are some very nice areas. There are some hiking portions, walking up the Hakone, like this mountain ridge, which is like an hour train ride roughly from Tokyo, but probably like 2 days walk. Like walking up the Hakone area, that was just a really, really nice thing. And there's this reconstructed checkpoint. So here's another thing that I didn't mention. Travel at the time was very restricted. So you had to have papers that they call them passports in a way, but basically it was like your local village guy said like, yes, this guy has permission to walk to this area or travel to this area. And they had like the samurai at the checkpoints. And if you didn't have permission, I don't know, you could even get executed in some situations, but like it was very, very controlled, like especially women and women leaving the city was very like no, because like that could have been like one of those lords, like their wife trying to escape Edo, right? Before a rebellion. Yeah. So, or people trying to smuggle in guns into the capital as well. Like that was another big concern. So anyway, one of these checkpoints was restored in the Hakone area. And it's beautiful. It's beautiful. Like, especially if you're into history, like it's a great place to go. It's right by Lake Ashi, which is a beautiful lake, almost at the top of this mountain ridge. If you walk up to the top, you can see Mount Fuji. It's just the day was beautiful the day that I went there. Like, it was a wonderful, like, just picture of Mount Fuji right there from the top of the mountain. So like, and I hiked up it. There's like a restored area with like kind of cobblestones and inclines and all that. So that was just a great area. So there are some wonderful areas to walk along, and I can give more examples if you want, but there quite a few of the areas are not that interesting. So some people walk it, but like walking the whole thing is not that popular.
But Hakone, we went there. We went to an
Mhm.
onsen,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it's very idyllic there, I thought, in Hakone.
Mhm.
Like the train
Yeah, yeah.
comes in, it's very nice, almost
Mhm.
like in the hills or the valley, I think, if I remember correctly.
Mhm.
But it's known for some onsens there. So that's a day I got rescued by a vending machine because I forgot my towel. And there's one in
Yeah,
the changing room as I was kind of getting stripped to go in the pools because they're divided out into female and male, right? So I couldn't
yeah.
shout my partner to give me my towel because she was well gone. So yeah, that was an interesting situation. But Hakone looked amazing, yeah, must admit.
Yeah. Like you were probably in the Hakone Yumoto area, which is like kind of the bottom area. And that's where you got like the hot springs and all that
Yes.
mainly. And then if you go up a little bit, then that's where the Tokaido like hiking trail starts.
Ah, I see. So if people
Mhm.
want either a trail or some nice springs to go and chill out in, it's a good place to be, I
Definitely.
think. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I've got some questions about some challenges that you faced on your trail. Of
Mhm.
course, it's a heck of a distance.
Mhm.
So that took you 29 days.
Yeah.
If maths is doing me correctly, or was that like 20, mm, 18, 17, 18 Ks a day, something like that?
Yeah, I guess it averages out to that. Like most days I did around 20 kilometers.
Mm.
And some days I did more, some days I did less. And there were like 3, 4 days where I had to take the day off for various reasons. Like one day, like I got a blister, I had to go get shoes and this and
Oh
that.
yeah.
So just stuff happens, right? But
Mm.
here's the thing though, like as you were mentioning with challenges, like for me, like I can't see the street signs, right? Like so
Yeah.
even if there's a sign that says like, this is the right way, whatever, this is the Tokaido that you should be walking on. Like, I can't see it. I can't see, like, for example, that this side of the road, that the sidewalk is going to end.
Mm.
So I'm sure there were some times where like the sidewalk was on the other side, but I was literally walking on the side of a highway because I didn't know the sidewalk was on the other side.
Got it.
Um, Getting lost was like pretty much a daily occurrence. Um, I was just going on Google Maps.
Mm.
Like I'd put in sometimes like an intermediary goal for the day, or like I'd break it down into 2 or 3 goals, and just walk there. But along the way, like I would get lost. Like one time, basically in like the middle of rice fields, and I had to like call out to a guy that was on some kind of farming equipment, like in the middle of a rice field. It's like, hey, I'm trying to get to this place, and like it was like probably like 10 kilometers away. So he was probably like confused, like seeing this like
Yeah.
foreigner holding like a white cane. It's like, wait, like what? You're walking there? Like that was like so many times I would go like, I'm trying to get to this place, and the person said like, well, if you take the train, it's like, no, I'm walking there. It's like, are you sure? It's really far. They're like, no, I'm trying to walk there. Actually, this is on purpose. And they go like, really? Are you sure? Like, yeah, like I walked from Kyoto, so like 5 kilometers is not a big deal.
That must have been such a goad, right? You've been walking so far and so long, and he's like, "Well, you just get a train for 2 minutes and you're there." It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah,
no,
yeah,
I've got to walk another 2 or 3
yeah.
hours, and
No, that so many times, and like I had people like, "Are you okay? I can give you a ride." It's like, no, I'm doing it on purpose.
oh,
But
funny
but
sight.
going back to what your question, like I when you look up like how long does it take to walk the Tokaido on Google or whatever, usually you see like 20 days or 21 days.
Okay,
So it's totally possible. Like I see videos of like some Japanese people like they'll walk like 30, 40 kilometers in a day. Like there's people that have done this
oh,
and documented it.
yeah,
Um, you know, like I'm fit, I run, I walk, I go to the gym, but the problem for me was I would get lost, right? So
mm,
like I would go out in the morning and I would do 20 kilometers like over 7, 8 hours. But I know physically I can do it faster. It's just that so
yeah,
many times along the way, like Google Maps might like here's the weirdest thing about Google Maps. Like it tries to get you the shortest way, but sometimes the easiest way is not the shortest way. Like if I
yeah,
just walk along the
yeah,
highway, I'd save myself an hour of getting lost.
yeah.
But yeah, so that was like the daily battle that I was having. Like every single morning is like, oh my God, like am I gonna get like 40 minutes, an hour lost again? And a lot of days I did. So, but that was just part of the journey. Like I just had to keep on going and figure it out. I made it 29 days. I had to skip like a couple portions that were a little bit too dangerous for me to do by myself.
Oh, okay.
Because they were like literally like hiking and stone areas, and there was nobody there with me. So
Yeah.
I had to kind of like either walk around it or take like a 6 kilometer portion of the train, like just run past that part.
Mhm.
So, that did happen, but again, yeah, average around 20 kilometers, some days more, some days less. And then it ended up being, I arrived in Tokyo on day 29.
And did you along the way just plan each day as it comes in terms of like accommodation and where to stay to see how you get on, or did you always have a target in mind?
All right. So the first, let's say like 5, 6 days, I planned that pretty carefully. I booked the first two hotels or two, I think. Yeah. And then, the problem was like, I wasn't 100% sure how much I was going to be able to advance in
Mm.
a day. So then I started booking hotels as I went along. And planning like each part of the trip like just a few days before. um Once I started realizing like, okay, 20 kilometers is a pretty safe distance that I can do without pushing myself too hard, and making it by nightfall, like 5:30, because I was doing it in the fall, so 5:30 it was dark,
Hmm.
so I
Yeah,
had to
yeah.
get to the station. What I was doing, I was getting to train stations and then train back to my hotel. And then the next morning I would ride the train back to where I left off most
Oh,
days.
okay. Yeah,
Because a lot of these rural areas don't have like hotels in them,
of
right?
course.
Like I
Yeah,
was
yeah.
going through some very rural areas at the time. So I had to like kind of have a hub in like a more populated area and then go back and forth morning, night, morning, night. Um, so yeah, by the time that I was a few days into this, I started realizing like, okay, about this is how much I can do. And then I started getting an idea, right? So if I can probably spend like 4 or 5 days in like, for example, Nagoya, which is a big city, and I can get to about this distance. And then if I have to extend, I'll extend. I did extend a couple times in some places. And then once it seemed like, okay, it seems closer to move to the next hotel, then I would move hotels. And then from there, I would start to kind of backtrack and walk, walk, walk,
Got
walk,
it.
walk, walk.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I was just like little by little moving hotels and moving back and forth on the train in the morning and night.
And did you meet anyone along the route, or was it purely pretty much solo?
So I didn't meet like anybody like hiking or
Mm.
doing like the trail like me, but just along the way I met so many people. Like for example, like I have a pretty decent following in Japan of Japanese people.
Hmm.
And so they were like, "Oh, I actually live in this like little rural town that you would never go to. When you get to the train station, I'll be there. I'll meet you."
That's awesome.
Yeah. And so like I ended up like with this lady, like we went to like a little local supermarket and drank like some smoothies of like local vegetables. Um, like or like this person that lived in like a pretty rural area is like, I'll go pick you up at the end of the day. We'll go like to some random little like teishoku, like little like food place.
Mm.
And so a lot of places like I was actually able to meet people that I had only interacted with online. And then just on the road, there were so many just really, really nice people that go like, they would stop. It's like, hey, the sidewalk's about to end. Let me walk you over to this side or this and that. Or like at restaurants, this one lady, she started talking to me because she noticed I was looking for the chopsticks. Like I
Yeah.
wasn't sure exactly where it was. And then she's an older lady. She started talking to me. It turned out that she loved Hawaii. She told me like, I've been there 33 times and oh my God, I love it, love it. I started talking. And she's like, I'm so sorry. I can't talk about Hawaii with my friends because they always think I'm bragging. It's like, no, no, no. I live there. I'm happy to hear about your Hawaii stories. And then I go like, okay, I gotta go. Like I finished my meal. And then she's like, hang on, wait. And then she rushes over to the register and like, it's like, I'm gonna pay. It's like, no, no, you don't have to pay. You don't have to pay. And then she's like, no, no, I paid. And she paid for me. And then she's like, where are you staying? Like, oh, she walked me over to the hotel where I was gonna
Yeah.
stay at, and just incredibly nice. So like I met a lot of people along the way and like restaurants, just random streets and all that. And it was just very, very nice people as well.
I would sort of expect that from Japanese people because I think they're some of the nicest in the world, right?
Yeah, I
At
mean,
least
I
help you out somewhere along the line.
absolutely. Yeah, like it was just one. I've had plenty of nice experiences in Japan before this, but
Mm.
when you're in trouble, when you're like, oh crap, do I have to like cross here? Oh, am I gonna have to like walk on a highway again? Like, when you're in these situations and somebody just like shows up, is like, hey, hang on, the sidewalk's ending there. Like, let me walk you over. Like, you're so grateful. Like, I was just, oh, thank you so much, because like for me, like I can't see, like, let's say like a normally sighted person can look ahead and maybe see like a 15-minute walk ahead of them. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of, I
Yeah,
have
true.
to walk there and then realize like, oh crap, this is a dead end, and then walk back. And that might
Hmm.
be like 20, 30 minutes of wasted time. Right.
Yeah.
And energy. And also like the psychological thing of like, oh my God, all right, now where do I have to go now? Like, so when people would show up like that, little angels, they'd show up and they go like, oh, let me help you out. Like, thank you. Thank you so much.
I do know that feeling. Once last year, we were
Uh,
on a road trip across Canada and USA, and we are in the West Coast, I
yeah.
think in Redwood National Park, somewhere near there.
Uh-huh.
And we walked this trail. So we parked the car in the car parking lot,
Yeah.
walked to the start of the trail, which is another 5 or 6 kilometers back. And the plan was to start the trail, and then at the end of this trail, it'll come back round to the car park because it sort of links over to the water and then into the car park, right? So it's like a loop.
Sure.
So we walked to the start point, got on the trail, saw loads of people doing it, thought, oh great, yeah, seems normal. Walked to probably about 500 meters. We could see the car park. We're level, but there's a big gorge in the middle, so you can't just go across, right? So we're like, oh,
Mm.
that's the car park. We're nearly there.
Yeah.
And then there's this huge felled redwood tree in the middle of the path. I'm like, oh, what's that doing there? Like
Uh-huh.
the ranger told us, oh yeah, the path is clear. You can do this, go round. Like, oh, that's a bit weird. And so we started to look around for another way around it. No paths. And this tree is huge. Right? I'm not talking like one you can climb, just like step
Sure.
over it. This is a huge tree. We're like,
Hmm.
oh, we're stuck here. And then there's no one else around. So we walked all the way back, and I was absolutely devastated because the energy
Yeah.
and your mental capacity, like, oh, we're nearly there. We're literally minutes away from finishing. You now have to walk an extra, must be at least an hour and a
Yeah.
half maybe to get back to where you started, then back again to
I
the
know.
car park on from the road, right? So, yeah,
Yeah.
incredible mental strength to keep going every day for that. Yeah, I applaud you for that.
Oh, well, thank you, thank you. Yeah, that like let's just say like it took you an hour and it would have taken you an hour and a half to walk the rest of the trail. Like it's not the same because you got that like mental things like, oh my
Yes.
God, I have to
Yeah.
backtrack. It's like, oh, like it feels like a waste of time in a sense, even
Wait.
though
Yeah.
like the way
Yeah.
there it was fun, you enjoyed it, but then now you have to walk back. It's like, oh, jeez,
Yeah. No one's speaking
yeah,
anything. We're just like marching back and then
yeah,
marching back up again. And we got back to the start point. We're like, oh, because we saw some people come back from the trail. We're like, we thought they must have seen the tree, and no one said
yeah,
anything. But then we
yeah,
asked a few people, we're like, oh yeah, we saw the tree, and that was it. We turned around, but no one said anything. If they would have told us at the start, we obviously
yeah,
wouldn't have walked all the way down that trail to see that tree.
sure, yeah,
Strange,
yeah,
strange phenomenon. Yeah, there we go.
yeah.
Hey, yeah, just a quick one. I just want to say there are many ways to support this podcast. You can buy me a coffee and help support the podcast with $5, or you can go to my merch store with the affiliate link with TeePublic, where there's plenty of merch available to buy, such as t-shirts, jumpers, hoodies, and also some children's clothing. Thirdly, which is free, you can also rate and review this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podchaser, or Good Pods. Also, you can find me on social media on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. Simply just search for Winging It Travel Podcast, and you'll find me displaying all my social media content for traveling, podcast, and other stuff. Thank you. My next question for you is: what did you learn about yourself on this trail? Because obviously
Mhm.
you know yourself pretty well at that point, but I guess an intense trip like this, where you've got to walk every day, those sort of challenges that you come up with, is going to probably make you learn something about yourself that you probably didn't know before.
Yeah, yeah. Like I think that it comes down to with something like this. I think with travel in general, but especially
Mm,
with like this kind of like trek kind of thing, like you can't plan everything,
true.
right? And you like rain, for example. Like
Mm,
I was hoping every single day it wouldn't rain. There were only like 2 days where it rained. One day it rained kind of bad. The other day wasn't that bad. Like it cleared up middle of the day, so it wasn't that bad. But I was very fortunate with the rain. But like it comes like what my point here is that like you can't anticipate everything. And when sometimes things don't go bad, like you just have to accept it and just deal with it in the moment, right? Like,
Mm.
that goes back to my eyesight. It's like, there's things I can't do, and then but I have to find a way around it and deal with it in the moment. But
Sure.
like that's more of like a big picture thing, and it's when you're doing something like this, it's like every single day, right? Every morning you're praying like, I hope it's not raining. I hope the weather's okay. And then I hope I don't get lost for like 2 hours. I hope, like, here's another thing, for example, like there were multiple tunnels throughout the way. The very first one, I actually walked through a tunnel that I wasn't supposed to walk through because Google Maps was telling me to walk through the tunnel, but
Mm.
that wasn't for pedestrians.
Oh, okay.
So I was literally walking like on the road and cars were kind of going around me. And then like 2, 3 minutes after I got out of the tunnel, the police came and two police officers came. They go, "Hey, you walked through the tunnel." It's like, and in Japanese we're talking, right? And they go like,
Yeah.
"Yeah, I'm sorry. Was I not like that? That's not allowed. I'm sorry, I didn't know." They go, "Yeah, that's not for pedestrians." I guess there was a camera there.
Right.
And so they're like, "So where are you going? This and that, passport." And they radioed in. I didn't get arrested, thankfully. I just explained like, sorry, I didn't know, and they
Yeah.
saw my cane, and then they asked like, "Where are you going?" And they go, "Tokyo." And they go, and this is the very first day. I was still in Kyoto. but but from there on out, like I was always very paranoid about tunnels, and there were multiple tunnels I had to go
Mm.
through, and like I can't see the maps on Google Maps very well.
Mm.
I can kind of see like some lines there and there, but like I can't tell like the fine detail. So like I was just going and understanding that I may have to like walk through some highway areas. I may have to walk through some tunnels. I may have to do this and that. And I walked through like one tunnel that was like 14 minutes long to walk through. It was huge. I didn't know it was there. Like that was just a total surprise to me. Thankfully, there was a little sidewalk area. But the thing is, like, I didn't know what to expect on a lot of days. Like I had a rough idea of where I was going to begin. And well, I knew where I was going to begin and I knew my goal. And I knew like sometimes a little bit along the way, like certain areas that I had to kind of pass through, but I didn't know where I was going to get lost. I didn't know where there was going to be a tunnel a lot of times. I didn't know, a lot of aspects. I didn't know if there was going to be a place to eat in some places. So I just had
Mm.
to like buy stuff at the convenience store in the morning and put it in my backpack.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
like just accepting that there are things that are beyond my control. And when something doesn't work out, I just have to decide in the moment. Like if it's raining in the morning, I had to calculate like, do I have enough days to take it off, or am I going to have to walk this in the rain? And it ended up working out all okay because my return flight was 30 on day 31, so I had 30 days to do this,
Oh,
but I didn't
wow.
want to have
Okay.
to cancel,
Huh.
but I had a hard deadline, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So like all this stuff was always like every single day, next day, what am I gonna do? What am I gonna do? I had to plan it out, figure it out. Oh, no hotel here. Okay, so maybe there's a hotel here. Oh, just accepting there's challenges along the way, and that you can't predict everything, right? But you have
Mm.
to deal with it when it happens, and you deal with it in the best way you can in that moment.
And my next question, you did mention food.
Mhm.
This is kind of two pronged, really, like some of your
Mhm.
favorite Japanese food. But what was fueling the trip? Were you like a ramen person after a hike, or were you a Japanese curry? What was your go-to meals, if you like?
No, I love, food in Japan. Like it's generally very affordable, and
Mm.
even the cheap stuff is quite good.
Yeah.
But usually, so this was my plan for most of the trip. Um, in the morning, I would go to the convenience store, buy like maybe two rice balls or a sandwich, maybe like a salad, basically stuff that I could easily carry in my backpack, that wasn't going to like spill or get messy.
Hmm.
And that was my lunch because, um, well, one, I was walking in a lot of rural areas where I couldn't count on there being like a convenience store exactly like, 5 minutes away from me at
Yeah.
every single turn. But also, finding a convenience store would have been another maybe like in some situations 30, 40, 50 minutes
Yeah. Yeah. Sure.
because like the how can I put it? Like traveling 10 kilometers for me is not such a big deal, but a lot of times the most annoying thing is finding that last little location
Yeah.
because you
Annoying.
have to like turn here, turn there, turn here, turn there. And then if I have to like stop and then input a convenience store and see where it is and try to find it, like that was just a waste of time and I didn't have that much time. So most days I would go to the convenience store, pack my lunch, boom, put it there, and I'd literally sit on a sidewalk or stand on the side of a highway and eat, or like lean on a guide rail or something like that, like on one of those guardrails. So many days, yeah, I did that, just like sitting on literally on the sidewalk. So and hey, convenience store, nothing wrong with convenience store
Oh
food.
yeah,
Like
they're great in
it's actually
Japan.
quite good in Japan.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
they're good.
it's
Yeah,
better than in the US.
yeah.
So, no complaints in that regard. I mean, I did start to get a little tired of the rice balls by like day, I don't know, 15 or 20, but nevertheless, I went through like all the flavors, I think. But in the evenings, it was more fun because in
Yeah.
the evenings, like, I did have curry like one time because I was just like walking, like, oh, I smell curry. Like, okay, I'm just gonna pop in there, and I go like, hey, I think it was a Kokoichi, which is like one of the most famous
Ah,
chains in
the
Japan,
favorite.
right?
Yeah,
People love it, and it's good. It's good.
yeah,
But I can't see the sign, so I just smelled curry. Like, okay,
yeah,
it's a
yeah.
curry place. Walk in. It's like, hey, what do you have? What's your special? Like, okay, I'll go with that. Or like another place, like I smelled like something like ramen, and ended up being like this like Nagoya style ramen with like entire heads of like garlic in it. It was called like
Oh wow.
stamina ramen.
Yeah.
It was quite good, but you start to smell like garlic, right?
Yeah.
Like another place in Hamamatsu in Shizuoka, like it was a kushikatsu place. So basically, it's these deep fried skewers.
Mm.
And it's on a counter. Well, I was sitting at the counter, and then the chef is in front of you deep frying these skewers and vegetables and seafood and meat and whatever, right? And it was like all you can eat in the sense of like they'll give you, it was omakase, so they pick three at a time. They'll give you three skewers at a time. You eat the three skewers, and then if you don't do anything, they'll keep giving you the three skewers at a time, until you let them know. It's like, okay, I'm done. I don't know. I probably ate like 30, 40 skewers. And I think that day was like a particularly hard day. I got really, really lost. I lost my like earbuds. I barely made it to the station in time that day. So I was like, no, I'm just gonna eat today. So, and very affordable compared to especially Hawaii. So like every evening more or less was like a lot of discovery. Sometimes I'd look on the phone, but the thing about the phone is like it'll tell you it's at the train station, but the train stations are like mazes. So it's once you're in the train
Yes.
station,
Yes.
it's you can't find the restaurant via the phone. So a lot of times I would just like, oh, this is a restaurant, walk in. Excuse me, what do you serve here? Because I couldn't see the menus, right?
Yeah.
So many times I just did that. And sometimes it was like, oh, I've already had that like yesterday, so I'll walk to the next one, walk to the next one. And I had some nice surprises with like the fried skewers and all
Mhm.
that. So it was the evenings I got to just have little food adventures.
I guess you're knackered from the trail, right? So my
Yeah.
last question is the day before you flew out, I
Mhm.
guess that was like one day you're not walking, right? So what did you do
Yeah.
that day to reflect on your trip and always just completely tired and just chilling out in the hotel?
So the let's see, the day before I actually ended up seeing a friend that I hadn't seen in a long time, but
Oh,
then that
okay.
evening I had a little bit of a party in Tokyo. A friend owns a bar there, and then
Mhm.
like I said, I have quite a few followers in Japan, so
Mm.
I just said like, hey, I'm gonna be here on this evening in Tokyo. Whoever wants to come check it out. Like maybe like 30 people ended up coming from Japan,
Oh,
from
nice.
originally from other people from
Yeah.
other places too. And one of those, like, I have a friend that he has a costume character. He does this, that's his job. Like
Okay.
he created one of these big Japanese characters. He's a rugby mascot.
Oh,
Ragamaru-kun is the name, but
yeah.
he lived right in that area. He walked from his like a house, I guess, in the costume, came out to the store, and he's like, my friends told me like, hey, there's somebody out there for you. And I walked outside. It's like, oh my God, it's the costume character. So that was my last day. Like it was a really fun thing getting to see all these people that came out to see me, and we had a good time in this bar. And then the last day, the last day was like in the afternoon. I had to get on the plane, but
Yeah.
well, evening. But in the morning, I was free. So I'm a content creator. I like to create videos about Japan and all that stuff. So I thought, what can I do with just a few hours that's super interesting and funny and unique? Plus, I'm tired, so I don't want to like walk a bunch. And the idea that I came up with was go get a massage in Akihabara, which is like the nerd area of Japan. And
Okay.
it was like by a maid, so there's this like uh, maids, they're dressed like French maids, right? And they're like these maid cafes, but there's also like a maid massage. And it's just like a normal, totally
Oh,
normal massage, nothing
yeah.
weird or whatever. It's just
Yeah.
they're dressed like maid. And so I did
That sounds
this.
so Japanese.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. And they call you like master and this and that, but it's just like she's a trained masseuse, just normal
Yeah,
massage.
yeah.
And so I ended up doing a video about that, right? So I was able to turn
Okay.
that into content as well. And I got a nice massage after walking for like, 500 kilometers. So
Needed.
nice, two birds, one stone.
Yeah. And you're planning to do another walk. Is that Kyoto to Hiroshima or Hiroshima? How do you pronounce that place?
Hiroshima. Hiroshima.
Hiroshima.
Yeah.
So you plan to
Yeah.
do a walk there. How long is that? And do you anticipate the same challenges maybe?
So yes, I'm planning to do this again in the fall, so it'll be like 1 year after
Hmm.
the first trip, the Tokaido trip. This will be Kyoto to specifically it's Miyajima. So Miyajima is very, very famous. So it's you've probably seen pictures of it if you haven't been there yourself, but it's that Torii Gate, the red gate that's in
Mm.
the ocean.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so the when the tide is up, it's in the water. When the tide is down, you can
Mhm.
walk out to it.
Yeah.
And that's like on this island right off of the coast of Hiroshima. So
Hmm.
my final destination is there.
Oh, nice.
Um,
Yeah.
and in terms of distance, it'll probably just that stretch is a little over 400 kilometers. But I think this time around, what I want to do is maybe like take a few detours, like maybe like a little extra like hiking path through this like abandoned trail railroad that I really like in Osaka.
Hmm.
And like for example, just visiting some areas in Kyoto or like in Kobe, there's this life-size statue of this one of these old giant robot like anime things. Like it's a really cool little area park in Kobe. So like kind of trying it, I like instead of just making it all about walking, also take a little bit of extra time
Mm.
to show off some interesting areas. So I think between these detours, I may get close to the 500-kilometer mark again. I anticipate it'll probably take me pretty much like, I don't know, almost 30 days. Just to make the most of it, I want to shoot as many videos as possible and do it again. I used to live in that area. So for me, it's I haven't been to Kobe in years. So it'll be wonderful to walk through that area again, see like some of the areas where I used to commute every single day in work. I think the Kansai area will be a fairly easy walk. But then once I start to get into the more rural areas, that'll be more like uncharted territory again. So
Mm.
I do anticipate getting lost a lot in those rural areas, but that's part of the journey, right? Like if it was
Yeah.
easy, it wouldn't be as interesting. So I'm totally fine with that. And part of the point of what I do of these things is to show like how I deal with those problems as somebody
Mm.
with a visual impairment.
Yeah.
To show the fact that I do use a white cane, to show the fact that yeah, like it may not be as easy, but I still find a way to do it. But to do it in an interesting way, to do it in an entertaining way, and hopefully in an educational way. Like for if somebody's interested in visiting some specific area of Japan, maybe
Hmm.
they come across one of my videos and it's helpful in some way. So, I try to do it like, I don't know, multiple things through this. And I think through this video series and my posts on social media, a lot of people did get to kind of learn about the fact that I have a visual impairment. I'm not constantly talking about it, but I showed it in an organic way, and they saw some of the challenges, and they were able to learn a little bit about what it's like for somebody in my situation in those kinds of when I'm doing something like that.
And that's quite important because I think people who are in the same situation probably need that content, right? And
Mhm.
also
Yeah, yeah.
even people without that, maybe give them a bit of a if they've got an excuse of not to go to Japan or that seems a bit difficult or too hard, you might just give them a bit of a kick up the arse, say, hey, let's just get there and go and check it out, you know? I think it works
Yeah.
both ways.
I think Japan is a very, very easy country to
Oh yeah.
visit as somebody like even if you don't know the language.
Mm.
Of course, transportation is great, but also like we were saying, people are generally quite nice. There's over the past 20 years, there's more and more English all over the place, even on menus.
Mm.
There's a lot of funny English too, but usually you get the idea. But also, like for example, with somebody with a visual impairment, like here's something that maybe not a lot of people mention, but those big train stations, especially in Tokyo and big cities, are super confusing, even for somebody that is totally
Yeah.
sighted. Now, for somebody that can't see the signs, it's even worse. Now, but here's a wonderful thing, like for somebody with a disability, even if you're in a wheelchair, if you go up to like the window or the little office that's by the entrance to the turnstiles to get into the actual station, you tell them like, hey, I'm trying to get to this place. Could I get some assistance? They'll walk you up to the train platform. And then if there's a transfer, like you have to change trains, somebody will meet you there.
Oh
They'll
wow.
walk you over to the next train,
Yeah.
make sure you're on safely. They radioed it in. Oh, the person got on the train. And then there's somebody that meets you there at your final destination, walks you out to the turnstile. So I did this so many times because like I couldn't spend, 30 minutes trying to figure out,
Mm.
like I can understand the train announcements in Japanese, but if there's 20 platforms, like I'm not going to spend 30
Well,
minutes
yeah.
trying to find the right platform. Or even
Yeah.
then, like there's a local train, there's an express train. It gets confusing, right? So
Yeah.
like just going up saying like, hey, excuse me, I'm trying to get to this place. So easy. Sometimes you do have to wait a little bit because they can be very crowded. But if you do feel unsafe, if you have a visual impairment, if you're in a wheelchair, if you have some kind of mobility issue, that is absolutely an option. And you can, a lot of the train station employees, they can speak some English, especially in the more
Mm.
urban areas. So it's definitely something to be aware of.
That's great to know. Yeah,
Mhm.
that people can help you out that way.
Mhm.
We got helped out because my partner left her purse on the ticket machine. So you do your ticket machine, which is in itself, it's a bit
Mhm.
overwhelming. And
Yeah.
she must have placed it on top right and left it there. So we went, this is in Tokyo,
Mhm.
train station from the airport into town, into hostel. She went to get her wallet out or her purse out, no purse. Like, oh my God. And what they did is the person at the hostel rang the train station
Mhm.
and they've already collected it and they've already
Mhm.
taken an inventory of what was in there. So they're
Mhm.
asking Emma on the phone, in quite decent English, like what was in there to make sure nothing's been stolen or taken out.
Mhm.
And they're like, oh yeah, we'll keep it here. You can come back and pick up any time. Like nothing was stolen. And I think the joke we would have, like in London, for example, that would have been snapped up and taken in an instant, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, that's
It
that's good to know.
absolutely like Japan is extremely safe. Of course, maybe sometimes, you do lose a wallet, somebody will pick it up. That it can happen, but for the most
Mm,
part, it's really, really safe. I dropped a wallet one time on the bus, had a couple $100 probably in there in yen. Went to the bus like warehouse, whatever it was, the final
hmm
destination, final stop, and it was there. Everything was there. People, this is like to Americans and to people from a lot of other countries, this is always like baffling, but something that a lot of Japanese people do is when they go to like a cafe or something, or yeah, they have to like reserve a table, they'll leave their purse, they'll leave their wallet, they'll leave their phone on the table as a way of saying like, hey, this table is taken. And then they
Fine.
go take their order. They go like, oh my God, this would be gone in like a second, like here in the US. Like, but that's just how safe it generally is in Japan.
Mm, okay.
Yep.
And my next question is about YouTube. So
Mhm.
you mentioned before you got your YouTube channel. So obviously you're talking about Japan on that channel.
Mhm.
And what else do you talk about on there alongside Japan?
Yeah. So, for me, like I started doing japankyo.com, like a news blog in 2016
Hmm.
that evolved into my podcast, Japan Station, where I interview people about Japan stuff.
Yeah.
And then I started uploading that stuff to YouTube just as audio, but that doesn't do very well on YouTube if it's just the audio, right?
Yeah.
So in recent months, I've started to experiment with the YouTube side of things.
Hmm.
It's tricky, right? Because like what works for a podcast may not work on the YouTube side. So I'm currently in the kind of like trial and error process of finding what's going to work better on YouTube.
Hmm.
But I do a lot of interviews with some travel stuff, some language stuff, some kind of wacky like Japan stuff as well. And I'm yeah, that's always going to be there. But I'm trying to find like the kind of YouTube kind of series, a more specific thing that's going to work better on YouTube. I've been doing a lot of YouTube shorts as well, and that
Oh
has
yeah.
been going quite well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think YouTube is really pushing that at the moment because they're
Mm,
trying to compete with like TikTok and
yeah.
everybody's trying to do the short format thing at the moment. So I've found that my YouTube shorts tend to get significant amounts of views. So sometimes I'll do a little bit of news, Japanese like funny news or Japanese like language stuff.
Hmm.
So yeah, like Japankyo, if you look up Japankyo on YouTube, it'll pop up right away. If you go to japankyo.com, that's where all my Japan content is. It really is like anything and everything Japan, from food to travel to language stuff to just interesting people doing interesting things in Japan.
Are you going to branch out to maybe like Hawaiian life and stuff like that?
That's yes, yes. So I'm currently shooting videos in Hawaii. And that may start as like a Hawaii only kind of thing. But long term, I would love to do more just general travel stuff.
Mm.
As somebody with a visual impairment that it has a curiosity for going to other countries and wants to do more stuff like that beyond Japan. I love Japan and I'll always be doing that, but I want to keep kind of pushing myself and try new things. Like long term, I would love to expand that new channel that I'm working on.
Hmm.
So currently it's going to be just Hawaii stuff. I'm kind of starting small with that, but we'll see. Maybe longer term, I may start to do like other stuff beyond that as well.
Okay, and I got a bit of a nerd geeky question for you.
Mhm.
What is your technology of choice? So when you're out filming your content, what camera have you got? Or two cameras? You might have two. What microphone do you
Mhm.
use? And a super geeky question: what do you use to edit your videos in?
Sure. Video editing is something that I only got into like within the past, I don't know, 8 months, 9 months or so.
Mm.
So I'm not good at it. I keep things as simple as possible because my philosophy is if I get too carried away with like obsessing over the little details, I'm just not gonna get things
Yeah,
out
of
in a
course.
timely fashion.
Yeah.
And I have the extra kind of barrier of my eyesight. So it's like, I've just accepted that like it's better for me in this situation to just try to get it out as simply as possible and improve as I keep doing it.
Hmm.
But for me, like for example, with the Tokaido thing, like what I did was I just used my phone. Like I,
Yeah.
I just used my phone and I was holding it like as I was walking and I would
Mm.
talk into it. And because the phone was so close, like the sound quality actually ended up being quite good for most of it.
Hmm.
I do have a lapel mic that
Oh yeah.
I used a couple times.
Hmm.
And so, that is something that I'm working with. At home, I have a more involved setup. So I have a Go XLR, which is like a USB to XLR thing. It has like a soundboard, different, the what do you call them? Like the little switches for all
Hmm.
the different, equalizer and all that stuff. So I've been doing this since like 2017. So I decided like I'm gonna get that, help save some time. And then yeah, long term, I would love to, expand more of the camera side, but right now it's more just like I need to get used to working with just filming stuff, and then
Mm.
I can maybe improve from there. In terms of like editing, I used to just use like Audacity completely
Oh
for
yeah.
the audio.
Yeah.
I still stick to that, just keep it simple. For the video, honestly, like I'm just working with like free video editing software because I'm not doing anything like complicated. I'm just chopping things up, keeping
Yeah.
it really simple. My video when I'm outside filming stuff, I try to do it in a way that like it's minimal editing is involved. So I'm narrating as I'm doing it. Whether I switch that style up or not in the future, I don't know. I'll see. But for now, like it's like the priority is just get it out and then see what works. And then
Yeah.
if I start to get traction with that style, I can keep doing it.
You know,
If it
yeah, yeah.
doesn't, then I start to experiment maybe with some voiceover, trying different things.
Okay. And finally, how's it going as a full-time content creator? Like, are you enjoying it? Is it stressful? Is it promising? Like, how do you view it so far?
So it is stressful, in that, like I'm trying to grow this and turn it into something
Mm.
sustainable. I'm not there yet. Like I'm okay in terms of, money. I have, enough income to survive, but like the content creation side is not, at that point where I could live off of that
Yeah.
completely by any
Yeah.
means.
Same.
But, like I'm fine with, I've seen growth over the years. My Japanese language stuff has really taken off well, on X, on my social media. So I do
Hmm.
Japanese language content over there, and that's also part of the reason why I've decided expanding into the Hawaii side. It may be a good idea because Japan loves Hawaii, so that would be a good kind of starting point to grow that side.
Mm.
And then if I can keep growing that, then I can kind of expand. And then, ultimately like the Japan, like the Tokaido thing, the walk and the upcoming walk, that is also something that appeals to both sides, like the English speaking side and the
Yeah.
Japanese language side. So I'm trying to find a way to kind of attract both sides and just monetize little by little. For example, like the Tokaido challenge thing, like I was able to fund that because I was able to raise money like through sponsorships.
Oh wow.
So
Okay. Huh.
that was completely funded.
Wow. That's
So
amazing.
yeah, I mean it ended up costing like over $5,000 and I was able to get donations for that. So that worked out very nicely. I was really, really grateful for that. And I'm planning to, try to raise funds for the next walk. And long term, maybe I can, write some, stuff. I'm planning to maybe write some stuff in Japanese about my experiences and all that. So content creation, it can be quite stressful and monetizing and all that, but I enjoy it. I enjoy it a lot, and it's giving me these opportunities that I would never have done this walk if it wasn't that I could do this as basically a job, right?
Mm.
And it's been a wonderful experience, and I want to keep growing that. I think I was able to do something pretty unique, and I have perhaps a somewhat of a unique perspective on what I do because of my visual impairment, but just my life experiences as well.
Hmm.
So it's not easy, but I plan to keep trying and to keep expanding.
Okay, and where can the people find you in terms of the handles for all your content?
Yeah, so if you're interested in Japan, you want like just Japan content, the easiest thing to do is just go to japankyo.com. So Japan, just normal spelling, KYO.com. That's where I post all my podcast stuff, my interviews, the Tokaido challenge videos are there. Like everything is there. But if you look on YouTube, Japankyo, you can find the Tokaido challenge playlist there as well.
Hmm.
And then if you're interested in just my general stuff, maybe some of the more Hawaii stuff, you can find me Tony.dotvega on Instagram. I'm going to be posting more stuff there moving forward. And yeah, X Tony.vega as well. You can find me there. But the Hawaii stuff is mainly going to be, I think, on Instagram and then in the upcoming YouTube channel. So you can just on Google Tony.vega, Tony, just Tony.dotvega.
Okay, I'll put that in the show notes so people can click
Yep.
instantly.
Mhm.
And I normally finish my episode with some quick fire travel questions. I sort of make them up on the spot, and they're kind of your favorite things that you've seen worldwide. So I'm going to kick
Sure.
off with it's travel question time. Three countries that you traveled to that are your favorites.
Sure, sure. I mean, Japan, yay. Okay, but I
Yeah.
talked about that already.
Yeah.
So I'll put that aside. Taiwan. I when I was living in Japan, I had the chance to take well, it was like one of those low cost carriers, so
Yeah.
super cheap. Get over to Taiwan. I spent like maybe like 4 days, 5 days, I don't know, over there. Just the food was amazing. The night markets, I went to so many night
Amazing.
markets, ate
Yeah.
so much food. It
Mm.
was all really good, very cheap. Yeah, and of course the sites and all that, like the temples and just I went a bunch of places, but yeah, the food, like I would go back to Taiwan just for the food.
Same.
Yeah. So Taiwan was wonderful. What else? Actually, I have unfortunately not had the chance to go to Europe aside from once. I was in Finland like just a couple of years
Oh.
ago, and I loved it. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. It was just so refreshing for me to get out of Asia, just
Mm.
experience something different. I had one of my Patreon supporters actually lives in Finland. Super nice guy. He drove us around a bit. We went out to eat some like traditional Finnish food and reindeer, and just the food was great. Got to see like this old castle. There was like also like the Moomin Museum.
Hmm.
Moomin is this, character. I don't know if in Japan he's very popular, but this like fairy tale character, like children's book character.
Yeah.
And there's a museum there. It was very, very nice. I'm not like a Moomin fan or anything, but it was very well done, pretty new actually. So, Finland was a wonderful experience. I want to travel more in Europe, so that was a great first start in Europe.
Okay. And what about
Mhm.
three countries tomorrow that you can travel to that are new ones that
Yep.
would be like in your top three list?
Sure. Let's see. So, I love Asia. I want to see more of Asia. Hong Kong. I would love to go check out Hong Kong.
Hmm.
Outside of Asia, let's see. I have a lot of friends in Australia, actually, Sydney area. Like I have places to stay there, and that's been like I have to go, and I just haven't had the chance to yet. But that's an absolutely I will be going to Australia hopefully in the near future. And then Greece. I really, really want to go to Greece. I love Greek food. The history, of course, is incredible there. I'm sure it's quite beautiful as well. So that's another one of those places that is just that I got to go, and I haven't had the chance to yet.
Okay. And tell me your favorite landmark in Japan.
Oh man. Oh, that's okay. Favorite landmark. Oh, that is really difficult. Whew. Let's see. Jeez. Oh, there's so many places that I'd love to. Okay, Kyoto. Let's talk about Kyoto. So, this is such a this is such a I mean, most people that have been to Kyoto have probably been here, but for me personally, it's just such a fun um place, Fushimi Inari. So it's that shrine with all the torii gates.
Yeah, amazing.
Um, it's why does it stand out to me so much? It's because, well, it's a pretty unique location. You just don't see something like that. There's maybe a couple other shrines that kind of do it similar, but not to that scale.
Yeah.
And it's just like these tunnels of these, traditional torii gates, like the red gates. But also, like, for me as a person with the visual impairment, it's like, okay, I go to a shrine and I see the gate, I see the shrine. Okay, that's cool. It's interesting. I like the history, so I learned a little bit about that as well. I try to read up beforehand, but usually it's a short visit, right? But with Fushiminari, you've got like basically a hike as part of this, right? If you want to
Yeah.
go the whole route. So for me, like, I've been there so many times and I still enjoy it. And I'm sure I'll go back in the future because you get to kind of like go through this whole thing. And sometimes like there'll be like I don't know, like a fox or something that like scurries across, like, because it's basically in like the mountains in the middle of like a hill. So there's a long way to walk around. It's really nice and pretty unique, and you get a nice view at the top as well. And then there's like an ice cream place at the top too. So yeah, Fushiminari, like I love that place. I often go back.
Okay. And
Yeah.
is there somewhere in Japan that you've not been to that you'd love to go to next?
Yes. I have basically no experience in like the northern, northeast, Honshu area. So this is like north past Tokyo.
Mm.
It's most well known, unfortunately, for the 2011, earthquake. Like that was
Yeah.
one of the most that was the area where that happened, and the tsunami
Hmm.
and all that. But there's a lot of beautiful areas. Of course, in the winter it gets super cold. But if I continue doing these walks, I may do a Tokyo to up to that area
Oh,
walk.
wow.
I would love to be able to say I've walked the whole length of Japan, but
Yeah.
one step at a time. That costs a lot of money, and one step at a time. But that is one area that I haven't been to yet. I've been to most of Japan. I've been to Hokkaido. I've been to basically most of Honshu and Kyushu and Okinawa and Shikoku, but I have not been to that area. I do want to explore that area.
Okay. And lastly, because you mentioned food a lot, I'm going to ask you
Mhm.
your top three favorite Japanese dishes.
Ooh, okay, top three Japanese dishes. Let's see. So, uh, I mean, it's such a boring answer, but sushi, I love sushi. Oh my God, and so affordable. Like the conveyor belt stuff is
Hmm.
great, but also like going to a proper place, sit down place where you get served and all that from the sushi chef. This past trip that I was there for walking the Tokaido, I went to a place in near Yokohama, known for seafood.
Hmm.
So good. It was just this little place, basement, and we started talking to the chef. A friend was there. He's from originally from Canada. We were talking, and he's like, my friend says, "Oh, he's walking the Tokaido." I was like, "Oh, really?" And then he gave us this like really like opulent, really expensive like roll.
Oh.
And he's like, "No, just it's for your stamina so that you can keep walking." It's like, "Oh, wow, you don't have to pay for it." It's like, "Oh my God," like, wow. So super nice guy. But that was a great meal. So, of course, the conveyor belt stuff is great, really affordable. But if you can find like one of these little places, where it's just like one guy behind the
Mm.
counter, 9 seats, oh, totally recommend it, like tiny place. Aside from that, let's see. There's the ramen. Every area has its own like unique spin on ramen. I spend a lot of time in Fukuoka, so Hakata ramen is something that I enjoy. I eat that a lot. But yeah, look into, if you're in a new area, check because it might have its own unique spin on ramen.
Okay.
And then here's a little, it's not a full meal thing, but it's a korokke. So they're it's derived from like croquettes, like I guess the French croquettes, but they're like these deep fried potato things. Usually they have something in the middle, like meat is the most common one, like ground meat. And my recommendation for that is look for either butcher shops that
Okay.
they may not be open all day. They just open kind of, and they close it like they open early, they close maybe 5 p.m. or something.
Hmm.
And usually in these butcher shops, they have like deep fried foods that you can just pick up a few. And the korokke there, the potato, like deep fried potato things are very good usually there. Or in popular areas, they may have like the little windows that are just like a little kiosk almost, and they're deep frying them right there on the
Oh,
spot. I
wow.
love those. Whenever I end up, seeing one, I usually end up having one and burning my mouth, but they're always good.
That's amazing. Okay.
Yeah.
Tony, thanks for coming on to the podcast and sharing your story. Another great podcast
Yeah.
about Japan. You've got a unique story for sure. And I'll be tuning in to your YouTube and your podcast to keep an eye on what you're up to. And hopefully, or maybe, who knows, I'll see you one day for a podcast and a YouTube combined bit of content for our respective channels. Finally, I'm
Yeah.
actually in Japan next year. So hopefully I might see you
Oh,
then.
wow. Oh, maybe it overlaps. We'll see. We'll see. Let me know.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, thank you for having me on the show. It was a pleasure. And yeah, man, just keep going. You've got so much content. It's amazing. It's so hard to keep up with it, right? But you're doing it and you're expanding
Yeah.
into YouTube. Like, it's wonderful to see as a fellow content creator. Like, I really admire that. So keep with it, man. And hopefully we can either maybe Hawaii or Japan. We'll meet up.
Oh, they're both on the list, and I really appreciate your words. Yeah, thanks so much.
Yep.
Thank you. Thanks for tuning in to the podcast episode today. If you've been inspired by today's chat and want to book some travel, if you head to the show notes, you'll see some affiliate links below which help support this podcast. You'll find Skyscanner to book your flight. You'll find booking.com to book that accommodation. Want to stay in a super cool hostel? You'll see Hostelworld down there too. You'll find Revolut to get your travel card sorted. Click the GigSky link to get your eSIM ready for your trip. And more importantly, you'll find Safety Wing Insurance to get that travel insurance for your trip. There are many more to check out, so when you click that link and book your product, a small commission goes towards me and the Winging It Travel podcast. Thank you in advance and enjoy your travels.